So I can't speak for the rest of the world obviously, but here in New Zealand, plywood furniture, kitchens and styling really is pretty popular. And so my clients are in the process of building a kind of a budget, low-cost home, and they're after a kind of a stylish plywood kitchen. And so this is how I'm going to go about making it. But really, this is how I make all cabinetry. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to show off how I go about making basic cabinets, because really that's all kitchens are, is some boxes, and the fronts look a bit fancy. So kitchens are one of the few times where I make a full cutting list, and so then I can just spend the first couple of hours in the day cutting up all my panels, and so then I can go and edge all the pieces that need it, and that way I can just set everything up once and do it. So it's a pretty efficient way of getting things done. So once everything is ready, edged and sanded, I can start actually screwing together the components. I make my carcasses so that all the dividers or the vertical panels sit on top of the base panel. Just makes things a little bit stronger, I think. And then at the top I add kind of these stretchers or rails, and that really just holds the side panels in the right place and allows some screwing up into the bench top. Then I can add some adjustable feet. So this is a slightly longer unit, and so I'm putting a divider in the middle. So having these little clamping brackets makes life really simple for this kind of thing. Same as the smaller one, where you put a rail through the front, except that the middle divider has a notch cut out, and that means we can screw down into that. And again, using my little clamping squares makes this way easier to get things where they need to be. And for the backing, a little bit of glue and then a pin on some 7mm ply. I pretty much always use 6 or 7mm backings, because really what it's doing is stopping the unit from racking, and it's pretty important and an easy way to actually square up your unit as well. All the show faces for this kitchen are birch plywood, and it's important to note that most of the time these sheets are pretty good for square, but probably not good enough for cabinet making if you want really tight joints. So you should always square up the sheets yourself and then carry on. Okay, so this setup is for around the fridge. So this whole unit is lying down on its back. So the fridge is going to come into here, and so these units are always really oddball size. It's 700 deep for fridges usually, so that means you've got shitty offcuts from your sheet. But I've worked through that. So what we need to do is put this side panel onto this fridge unit. Of course, this whole side here is going to be seen from the kitchen. This is going to be a show panel. So we don't want to put screws through here, but we also want to have this whole unit kind of kit set, because it's a very odd, there's nothing connecting the bottom two panels. So it's a very flimsy unit when it's put together until it's sitting in place. So what I'm going to do is actually glue dominoes into a panel. So I've already cut the domino slots, and then in this side what I'm going to do is dry fit these on site, and then add a screw through into the domino to hold that together. And the other end is obviously glued into the show panel. That way I can unscrew these two pieces and kind of flat pack this whole unit, so getting it to site is super easy. Turns out two of my dominoes had glued in on a bit of an angle for some reason, so I had to kind of shave off one side of them a little bit to get them to fit, but after that all was good. So after making the pantry unit that goes next to the fridge unit, I can clamp them together in the right place and then screw them together. And with this unit fully sanded, I could throw some clear coat on it, which I find is just as easy to do right where I built it. For this kitchen, the corner unit is going to be open with no doors or anything, so the whole thing is made from birch ply. And so the first thing to do is put the end panel on. Now in this case, I'm making the end panel go down to the floor because next to this is the oven. So what I'm going to do is screw right through the end panel because the show side is really the inside of the corner, and the oven is going to be blocking where the screws are, but I will fill the holes anyway. And next, using some small clamping blocks, I can position them to hold the middle shelf. Typically in a commercial kitchen, the backing of the corner unit would be full thickness 16 or 18 mil boards, and that would support the weight of whatever bench top you have. I prefer to put a small post in the back corner, which is going to do all the hard heavy lifting, and then just use my 6 mil backing. Typically the top of these corner units would be a full panel like the shelf and the base unit, but that would in this case require me to buy a whole sheet of plywood just for that one piece. So I opted to use a series of rails, a bit like the straightforward carcasses. It was a little bit tricky getting dominoes in because, well, they don't actually go in on an angle very well. But otherwise, it works pretty good. And I'm leaving the back off at the moment while I do the finishing, which is just a water-based polyurethane. This has 3 coats on all the show faces. So when it comes to drawer runners, my preferred method is to put the bottom runner in first, and then you can cut a spacer from a scrap of plywood to put your top runner in, and then you can just keep cutting that spacer down to different heights to put the other runners in. In this case, I'm only putting one other runner in the middle. Okay, so I've got this dory rod clamped to the front of this tall pantry unit, and I've got a few marks along it where my hinges are going to need to go, so I can just strike off the story rod where the hinges will go, take the story rod over and mark them out on my door panel. So now that I've got my mark, I can use this little jig by Blum to work out where to drill for the hinge. So these Euro hinges are all done by center marks. So that line is the center of the hole I need to drill. And then I can drill that out to 35 mil to fit the cup hinge. And I'm going to drill out these hinge holes by hand with a hand drill, mainly because this door panel is pretty big and it's just going to be a bit awkward setting up a table for the drill press. So this is just as good. Maybe. My regular drill bit is blunt and this is not much better. After drilling the holes with the jig, I bring them up to 5mm, so then fits these hinge plates, mounting plates. Put them into the right place. And that should be that. Okay, so these hinges are Solis, just a brand I can get locally, and they're nice and cheap. Now, I like to screw my hinges on, just fine, excellent. But most hinges these days come with some version of some kind of expandable plug. They're terrible things. I don't know why I can't just put screws in. So, and it's actually, yeah, it's kind of hard to get just a hinge with just holes in it without these expandable things in. So all I do is take them out, and then they're good to go. Okay, of all the things I find myself doing in the workshop, this is one of the hardest things. We have a large door with more than 2 of these types of hinges. It can be quite tricky to put on, and we'll see if I can do it myself right now. So the best way to do this is to get the bottom hinge clipped on, and then the other 3 need to be lined up and all clipped on at the same time. So fast forward to me struggling away. Not too bad. So I haven't sanded up the edges or anything yet, and I don't do that until this point where I can work out if I really stuffed up and I need to make some trim for some things. So far it's looking good with a bit of adjustment. For this kitchen, all the finger pulls are just simple holes through the doors and drawer fronts. So that's what I'm doing here. Okay, so the drawer hardware I'm using is Hahn. It's very similar to the Blum stuff. It's a bit cheaper, not quite as good, but it does the job. It's made for 16mm panels, so you would have seen there's a rebate on the bottom because I'm using 18mm plywood. Other than that, it's very straightforward to put together. Alright, so I've got my panel ripped, and this is going to be doors and drawer fronts, and so I want to maintain the grain pattern going through, so I know that I need to cut an 8/86 to get 2 doors out of, and then what I'll do is cut that right down the middle, and then it'll give me a 3mm gap, and then that's it. I don't have to trim the doors anymore. So I'm going to have door, and set of drawer fronts, and let's hope it works. And here I'm just cutting up the drawer fronts, and so the piece of tape down the middle is just so I can label top, middle and bottom. So there's one smaller cupboard unit on this kitchen, and so just quickly go through the types of hinges that I'm using. So there is a visible difference for people who aren't used to these kind of hinges. So this is a full cover hinge, which means it's going to cover this side of the edge of the carcass fully, and the half cover hinge, which means it's going to cover half of that carcass panel. You can see here on the full cover hinge that the arm is straight, and on the half cover hinge you have this little kink, and when you get a full inset hinge, which means it sits inside the carcass unit, that this piece of this little kinked part is much bigger. So that's one easy way to identify the hinges. Well, it doesn't work. That's the old 100mm mistake there. My doors overlap by 100mm, so that's awesome. So the grain pattern doesn't work as nicely as it did, having to cut kind of 100mm out of the middle, but there is still some crossover, so it's not too bad. Back to drilling the finger pulls for the drawer fronts. Alright, so I've got all my drawer fronts ready to go, sanded pretty much. Got the finger pull sorted. The next thing is to fit the brackets onto the backs of these to fit onto the drawers that are in place at the moment. And this can be a little bit tricky, but not if you actually follow the instructions by the manufacturer. So you can see here I need to find these points here on my drawer fronts to screw on the little brackets, and I've got all the information I need here relative to the bottom of the drawer, or yeah, relative to the bottom of the drawer runner that's screwed onto the carcass, and then also relative to the side of the carcass, and from there you can mark each of the sets of drawers and go from there. This jig is to locate the drilling for the gallery rail, which goes on the side of the drawers, and it gives you some adjustment front and back with the drawer front, and it also makes it look like a much deeper drawer. Well, it makes it a much deeper drawer. So now with everything on site, I can put together the fridge unit once more and manhandle it into position. And then I could level up all the units. It pays to start with the corner unit and then work your way out from there. And for those of you thinking that plywood on the walls is the finished product, that is the style that is pretty common these days here. And also I won't be doing the bench tops, that is going to be stainless steel. So they're waiting for me to get the cabinets in so they can template it. So this is a good example of where a scriber really comes in handy. I've got the door jamb sticking out about 12mm, so I've got a 15mm scriber keeping my carcass away from the wall. That means my drawer fronts can come past and not hit the jamb, the window jamb. And last thing to do is glue on the toe kicks. I just use a few blobs of silicone. And that's it, finished. Hopefully might be helpful to somebody out there. See you on the next one, guys.